title everyone knows is Understanding Myself and Also the People Around Me. Very, very interesting topic, and this is a topic that was given from, we're starting to take topics from people that are watching our show. So, how do you understand yourself and the people around you? And the first thing I want to tell you right now is you need to understand yourself in order for you to understand the people around you. Now, what does that mean? It means that basically you and other people go hand in hand, and not understanding yourself leads to not understanding other people. And not understanding other people also leads to not understanding yourself either. So what we're going to talk about today is a true understanding of understanding yourself first and then others, and realizing this huge role that it has to play. So what is the first thing we want to talk about? First thing we want to talk about is understanding your current situation. Okay, understanding your current situation. So if we get that on the key point talk right here, on the key point it says, understanding your current situation. Don't worry, we're on lockdown right now. You guys there, over there in the tech? I need to understand your current situation. Here we go. There you go. There you go. Understanding your current situation. All right. So, understanding your current situation, what does that mean? It means that you have to first understand what is your current situation. Like, what is your current situation right now? Okay? So your current situation, what I want you to understand is it's something that you don't want to fake, right? You don't want to just sit there and say, oh, here's my current, oh, everything's okay and everything's good. The first thing I want you to understand is, what is your current situation? Don't fake it, but kind of be real with it. So I'm going to give you an example of what the current situation kind of looks like right now in the world. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a country that is the most desired country to immigrate to. Okay, the country that is most desired to immigrate to. So you're like, I wonder what country that is. And I'm pretty sure that everyone knows the answer to this is the number one country in the world that, like, if you took a world, when we took a world survey, the country that everyone wants to immigrate to is the United States of America, the U.S. Okay? And how high, like, what is the difference between 1 and 2? The difference between 1 and 2 is actually not even 1 and 2. The amount of people that want to immigrate to the U.S. is higher than the next 4. So from 2 to 5, if you add all those numbers together, it still doesn't reach how much people want to move to the U.S. Now, why? People want to move to the U.S., and the reason I give the U.S. as an example is because it's kind of like the most affluent and the most opportunity-giving country. Right? And this is why so many people want to immigrate to the United States. So, even though this is like the most affluent, the opportunity-giving country, let me tell you a few stats about America that makes people want to do it. Now, this is like, think about this. Right now, as of right now, people in America, more than any other time in history, and it's not even just even America, but the world at this moment, you are making the most amount of money. You are in the best health, you are living the longest, you have better housing, and you have the best education than has ever been in the history of the world. Right now is that situation. Now, what does that mean? So, the thing that's kind of weird is, even though we're in the most money, the most education, the best health, the best, living the longest, all the other different things, the thing that's kind of interesting is, since data has been collected in the U.S., people are the most unhappiest. Well, I can't say most unhappiest because that's what unhappiest means, right? They are the unhappiest. Right now, even though we are living at the best we've ever lived before, people are the unhappiest. And this is something kind of interesting because even though, what you think to yourself is, like, we are living at the time with the highest standard of living, and you would think to yourself is, if you have all the basic necessities and if you're living at the highest standards, you would definitely be much more happier. But the craziest part is we're living at the peak of standard of living. And yet we are the unhappiest ever. Since data was collected, we are the unhappiest. So what does that mean? Okay? What does that mean to us? And here's just some of the stats that I want to tell you, because everyone wants to immigrate to, the majority of people want to move, like overwhelmingly want to immigrate to America. But let me tell you about, a lot of you are college students, right? Let me tell you about U.S. college students. 3 things. Suicidal thoughts, severe depression, and self-injury has more than doubled in the last decade. Right, you got to think about that. This is just U.S. The college students is severe depression. What was it? Severe depression, suicidal thoughts, and self-injury has more than doubled in the last decade. Tell me how crazy that is. If you like, what? We're living at the highest standard, and yet people, like students, are having these types of thoughts. Even more is we're living in a very lonely time. We're living in a even though we're so connected through social media, connected through internet, we're living in the most loneliest time. Let me give you some stats about this too. If you look at the UK, right, it's such a severe situation that even in the UK, the Prime Minister has appointed a minister of loneliness. Can you imagine that? They have a minister just dealing with loneliness. And they say that, who else is lonely? The Germans are lonely, the French are lonely, the Scandinavians are lonely. We're like, what is going on? This is something that's very interesting that I want you guys to think about too is, it says that millennials, how many of you are millennials? Put your hands up if you're a millennial. Millennial means you're born anywhere from 1981 to 1996, right? Just millennials. If you're a millennial, this is the craziest part. In America, the majority of millennials are born to single parents or unmarried parents, or not parents, like single, unmarried parent, one parent. Majority. So people born from 1981 to 96, the majority in America are born from single, unmarried parents. Now, why is this significant? Because the only reason I'm bringing this up is not to say that, I'm not, the only point I'm making is, generally speaking, single parents are the loneliest group in America. This is how lonely things are right now. And the reason I'm bringing this up, and it's not just young people. They say that even right now, people over 45, thank God I'm not there, people over 45, 1/3 of people over 140, not 145, I don't think anyone's ever lived that long, right? Unless you're talking biblical terms, right? So 1/3 of the people over 45 are lonely, right? This is kind of a crazy stat if you think about it. People, we are living in a very, very lonely time. So what are the couple things I want you guys to bring up for yourselves is, the first advice I want to give to you, number one, is I need you to acknowledge your situation. Like really acknowledge your situation that you're in right now. Remember, don't fake it. Don't fake it, but acknowledge it. Truly acknowledge what is wrong, right? If I went to a Bible verse that, when God tells us about acknowledging ourselves, I want you to take a look at this verse. It's in James chapter 5, verse 16. Okay? And what James wrote here, it says is, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Okay? One of the things you have to realize is, just like biblically speaking, it says that we have to confess, or you have to acknowledge what you're going through. Like you really do. If you're lonely, if you're struggling, depression, mental illness, or things that you're struggling with in your life right now, one of the things you need to do is you need to confess it, right? The things that you've done wrong. Right? One thing that's very interesting is when you look at the human mind, when you have something wrong, or when you've done something wrong, or you're not dealing with certain things, one of the things that we go through in our hearts and our brains is what you call guilt. And guilt is not a healthy thing. And you want to know something very interesting about your brain? What guilt is, this emotion of guilt, you know what it's connected to in your body? It's got the same reaction as food poisoning. Food poisoning. You know what that means? Like, have you guys ever had this before? You stole something for the first time. You lied for the first time. Where does it hurt? It hurts your stomach. Your stomach is churning. Your stomach is like, oh, I don't feel so good. And you're like, the whole time you're like, what is going on? Because you feel so guilty. The guilt you have, your body's reaction is the same as food poisoning, as crazy as that sounds. What does it mean? It means your body also reacts to you not dealing with social norms in a normal way. And it's not normal for us to feel guilty and to do wrong things in society. And your body is even showing it to you, because when you feel the guilt, it's the same reaction as food poisoning. What does that mean? It means, like, this first point, I really want you to understand this is, the reason I gave you all the points about America and what's going on over there is because people are not acknowledging what they're going through, and they kind of keep it in, right? Whether it's shame or guilt, or they just don't want to share it with other people. And if you don't acknowledge it, you keep it inside, and it builds, and this is when people go through severe mental problems, when people think of suicidal thoughts, when people think of self-injury, right? So I really hope that number one is, everyone, you have to acknowledge your situation, Okay, which leads us to the second point. The second point is just as interesting, and the second point is the need for values, right? There is a need for you to have values to live by. Now, what is a value? So a lot of people ask me the question, like, what is a value? Is it a moral? Is it like, well, it is kind of like a moral code. It is like a standard, like set principles that give you a standard of how you should live, right? Yeah, set principles that give you a standard to what level of life you're living. Like one verse I want to show you is in Luke chapter 9, verse 25. And this is very, very similar because the Bible tells us the same thing. It says, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? And now what's it saying here? It's basically saying that, like, for instance, what's the use of getting that dream job you want when you lied, cheated, stealed, or even killed to get it? Like, you've lost yourself for that one thing. You don't have a moral, you don't have those values, that standard level of values to live by. And why is this so important? Well, the thing about these values is the values actually can't come from yourself. The values actually have to come from something higher. And this is why people get mentors. This is why people get religion. This is why people look to higher people than themselves to look for higher values of things that you don't know yourself. And to show you how much having values helps, one of the biggest places where you can get value is what? Learning values, one of the biggest places is religion. This is just common knowledge, right? One of the places is through religion. Now, let me tell you this interesting stat. This is for women. Women who attend any religious service at least once a week, you are 5 times more likely not to commit suicide. You gotta think about how crazy that is, right? And you know, the common sense says is if that's for a woman, it's gotta be the same for men too. But think about this. Woman just going to religious service once a week, you are 5 times more likely not to commit suicide. Why? It has to do with value. People, you have to go out and you have to search for something higher, and you need to have a value to live by. You can't go by yourself. You know why? Because we are kind of selfish by nature. And this is why people who don't have values will cheat, will steal, will lie, will kind of, you know, even some people extremely will go to, you know, murdering or killing or hurting people in order to get what they want. We need to have values to live by. What's it worth? Right? What you do has to have, you have to have that value to think to yourself, is it worth it for me to give up this of myself just to get that? Third thing I want to talk about today is understanding yourself through others. Okay? What does it mean to understand yourself through others? And let's take a look at this other Bible verses, Matthew chapter 18, verse 32 and 33. It's very interesting. It says, then the master called the servant. It says, you wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Okay? Shouldn't you? And what this story is very interesting because the story is basically one person had like a ton of debt. Like, so let's just say it's like $10 million. And then with this $10 million in debt, the king, because this person begged and pleaded, he forgave him of his debts. $10 million. Right? And then this person proceeds to go out and puts another person in jail that owes him like $5. Okay? Now, why is this so crazy? Now, why is the king so mad in this Bible verse? He's mad is because you know what it's like to be in debt, to plead, and just to really be in that situation. You're desperate, and you know the heart so well, and then you have someone else pleading to you, and you have no empathy towards them, and you throw them in jail when you yourself are forgiven. You understand the heart. You understand what this person is going through, yet you did nothing about it. In the same way, too, let me give you this example for all of you to think about. In Malaysia, there's a car that everyone owns, okay? And the car is called a Myvi, okay? Everyone's got a Myvi. If you come to Malaysia, you know, probably like 1 in 3 cars is a Myvi, right? So this Myvi, and if you put into U.S. dollars, it's in ringgit, it's about 40, 50,000 ringgit. And in U.S. dollars, it's anywhere from like $10,000 to $15,000. It's a very, very, you know, it's a very affordable car. And let's just say you have a Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz is like 100,000 US, which is like, what, 400,000 to 500,000 ringgit here, okay? So imagine you have these 2 cars. The difference is your parents bought you the Benz, and the second one is the Myvi. You worked on it yourself, and you bought it yourself, okay? So the question I give to you is, which one's more valuable? Which was more valuable? Okay, so I'll give you 1 second to think about it. It's like, oh, Well, this was more valuable. So I'm going to give you, there's 3 answers to this and 3 levels of answer. The first answer is purely external, a physical, monetary value is, of course the Benz is more expensive, the Benz is more valuable. Why? Because it's 10 times more expensive. And that is the first level of thought. Second level of thought is what? Second level of thought is very interesting because second level of thought is, no, it's the Myvi's more valuable. Why? Because of all the effort and just making that 10 to 15,000 US. Wow, it was so difficult and so hard. And even though this Benz is so much more expensive, but this is more valuable to me. And that's the second level. So then you think to yourself is, what the heck is the third level, right? The third level is what we're talking about right now, is the Benz. And you're like, what? How can the Benz be? Because if someone can understand what it takes just to make $10,000 to $15,000 US on your own, then when your parents give you this super expensive car, you realize from your experience how hard it is to make that much money, and your parents are giving you something 10 times the value, and you realize, wow, this is valuable because I understand from my experience what they went through. Right? And this is what we call what? This is understanding others from understanding yourself. Okay? The next point I want to bring up very, very quickly is what? It is understanding the need for change. Right? Understanding the need for change. Okay? So this key point here, understanding the need for change, is very interesting. Okay? Understanding the need for change. What the heck does that mean? I have to understand the need for change. Well, the first thing you have to realize about yourself is this. Number one is you cannot change other people. Right? Even though you want to make change, because I know that everyone wants to make change, but you have to really understand. Right? Understanding that there needs to be change. What does that mean? Of course, everyone understands there needs to be change. How do I know? Is because when you live with people, when you work with people, when there's these people that don't do what they're supposed to do, and you're like, there needs to be change. What is wrong with you? Right? You're not doing this, and you're not doing this, which means that we know there's a need for change. We know it. But the thing I want to bring up is understanding the need for change. Understanding the need for change, which means the first point here is this. You can't change others. That's the first point. You cannot change others. You have to realize that deeply in your thoughts and your head is that you cannot change others, and you have to get that so deeply embedded, because the more and more you play the game of blaming others for things that don't work, then you're always going to be stuck in a situation where it never changes. Why? Because you can't do anything about it. Other people, you cannot change them, which means the only person you can change is yourself. You can only change yourself, which means what? This point I want to make to you now is you must take full responsibility. Full responsibility of your actions. Like, have you done enough? Right? Have you done enough? Have you taken full responsibility even in your life? Right? Have you set yourself? Like, if I were to give you an interesting Bible verse for this too, it'd be Luke chapter 6, verse 42. And in Luke chapter 6, verse 42, very, 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 very famous verse. In Luke chapter 6, verse 42, what does it say? It says, before you take the speck out of someone else's eye, you have to take the plank out of your own eye, which means you have to look at yourself first before you look at others, right? Because the one you're dealing with, it might be just the same size, but in your eyes, it's huge, right? The plank in your eyes is so big, but here you are trying to take a speck out of someone else's eye. You have to change the way of thinking that instead of blaming others, you have to look at yourself, right? Not this verse. It is Luke chapter 6, verse 42, right? So you have to understand to yourself right now is you can only change yourself, which means that are you doing your best? Are you the one actually in a situation taking full responsibility? If you're taking full responsibility and you're doing your best, what does that mean? It means what? Think about this. Have you set your house in order? The things that you do. Right? Before you start taking a speck out of other people's eyes, think about what you can change about yourself. Are you someone who always procrastinates? Are you someone who's always late? Are you someone who doesn't fully do your responsibility? Are you someone that doesn't do the dishes or clean the house? Are you someone that doesn't wake up at the right time? Are you someone that doesn't help out with the chores? Are you someone who doesn't, there's so many different things when you look at it. Are you yourself taking full responsibility? Have you done it to the fullest extent? every problem that we see, there are things that other people need to do, but there's also things that you need to do. It's really hard to make change if you don't fully do what you're supposed to do first, right? If you do not change, if you do not think about yourself first, what you can do, it is very hard to mature. It is very hard to grow, right? And this is why a lot of times when you blame other people, the biggest problem that happens is you don't grow and you go through very, very difficult times, right? Because you can't mature. You're still stuck in that same place. Why? Because you're waiting for someone else to change. This last point I really want to make to you was you have to change yourself. Why? Because you cannot change other people. And in order to get this, this is why today's topic is so important, is it's understanding yourself really well. Like, you really need to understand yourself at that level, right? And we're so stuck and bent on, how can I understand other people? But people having a hard time understanding themselves in the first place. This is why I really hope that a lot of people, as you've listened to today's, that there's a couple things that you want to really understand is, number one is what? Acknowledge your situation. Where are you, right? Don't fake it. Don't say everything is good when it's not. Where are you in your situation? Number two is you have a need for values. You need to have values, a set principles and standards of how you're going to live, right? The third thing is you need to understand yourself to understand others. And of course, the last one is understanding the need for change, which means, yes, we all know there needs to be change, but you're always looking out. Instead, you have to look in. Why do you look at the speck in someone else's eye when you have the plank in yours? Right? I really hope that everyone here understood today's Bubble Talk really well. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment section. But also